Aaliyah, a middle-aged black woman with a steady life and a generous heart, falls deeply in love with Elon, a brilliant but volatile dreamer fresh out of university. When Elon loses everything, Aaliyah sacrifices her inheritance to fund his revolutionary invention, believing in his promise of love and success. But once he rises, he vanishes, leaving her shattered. Homeless but not broken, Aaliyah begins a quiet journey of healing, rebuilding, and self-discovery. The rest of her life is a powerful, emotional story about the price of love, the strength of a woman's spirit, and what it truly means to come home. Before we begin this intriguing journey, let me know where you are watching from. And make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so that you can find the video in case you drop off. They had met at a community science expo 2 years ago. He was younger by 7 years, freshly graduated from Howard University, standing beside a strange-looking contraption powered by solar cells and copper coils. His invention didn't work quite right, but his mind did. He spoke with such conviction that even the skeptical looked twice. Aaliyah had been intrigued and then slowly enthralled. The morning sun spilled through the half-open blinds, casting golden lines across Aaliyah's polished hardwood floor. The house hummed with stillness, a kind of quiet that felt earned after decades of work, sacrifice, and carefully chosen solitude. She sat by the window with her usual cup of ginger tea, her back straight, hands wrapped gently around the mug, eyes following a cardinal flitting between the branches of the pecan tree outside. She went to college, worked as a pharmacy technician, kept her credit clean, and lived modestly but comfortably. She never craved luxury, just peace, and for many years, that's exactly what she had. 46 years of life had taught her many things, but most of all, it taught her how to be still, how to sit with silence and let it speak. She had grown up in this same small Alabama town, a place where people knew each other's names and whispered about each other's choices. Her mother, Geneva, had once been the proud owner of the house Aaliyah now lived in. A school teacher with a spine of steel and opinions sharp enough to cut glass, Geneva had raised her daughter with clear expectations. Don't beg, don't trust too easy, and never tie your future to a man's dreams. Aaliyah had tried to live up to those teachings. For the most part, she had. Then came Elon. He entered her life like a summer storm, unpredictable, charming, and full of fire.
He was brilliant but broke, passionate but short-fused. Every few weeks, he lost another job and argument with a manager, a team that didn't see the vision, a system that wasn't built for minds like his. But they didn't see how he looked at her when he wasn't angry. They didn't hear the way he talked about energy, power grids, and freeing the world from blackouts. He called her his anchor. He said he couldn't do it without her. Aaliyah had heard every excuse. Still, she let him stay, not just in her home, but in her heart. From the outside, people whispered. Some said she was being used, others said she was lonely, desperate, aging. She believed him. His face was peaceful, younger, almost innocent. Her mother had been gone for 4 months now, and the house still smelled faintly of rose oil and old leather. Geneva's presence lingered in the walls, and the creaking stairs, in the mirror that hung crooked no matter how many times Aaliyah straightened it. But even belief has its price. This morning, as she sipped her tea and watched the bird disappear into the sky, she felt the faintest tug of unrest. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice, "A man who can't hold a job has no business holding your future." But Geneva had never known love like this, raw, aching, and consuming. Aaliyah set down her mug and walked toward the small back room where Elon was sleeping, curled under a thin blanket, beside a pile of tangled wires and scribbled equations. He was trying to impress her with a homemade green smoothie, avocado, spinach, chia seeds, and something she couldn't pronounce. But the blender kept jamming, sputtering loudly before going silent. He slammed his hand down on the counter, cursed under his breath, and yanked the cord from the wall so hard that it tore the socket plate loose. She watched him for a moment, torn between fear and devotion. Outside, the day was breaking open. And so, quietly, was she. The first time Aaliyah saw Elon lose his temper, it was over a blender. They'd been together just for months, and she had invited him over to cook a meal. Aaliyah had stood there stunned, a wooden spoon in her hand, the scent of sautéed garlic lingering in the air between them. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and wilted lilies. Aaliyah sat beside the bed, her mother's hand lying limp in hers, cool and motionless. Machines beat softly in the background, tracking time and breath. Geneva hadn't spoken in days. The stroke had come fast, stealing her voice first, then her movement, then almost cruelly her presence. Now only her body remained, shrunken beneath thin hospital sheets. Aaliyah hadn't left the room in hours. Her back ached from the stiff chair, her heart from everything else. She stared at her mother's face, still strong even in stillness. Geneva's hair had grown thin, gray curls pulled back with a headband Aaliyah had brought from home. The same woman who had once faced life like a battering ram, who never let a bill go unpaid, who raised a daughter with nothing but a worn Bible and iron will, was now fading. And Aaliyah didn't know how to let her go. She thought about all the arguments over Elon, over money, over dreams that didn't come with a retirement plan. Her mother had spent months warning her, urging her to leave Elon, to see the man behind the ambition. But Aaliyah never listened. Not because she didn't hear her, but because she couldn't imagine life without believing in someone. It was belief that kept her going. That, and love. Even if love didn't always come gift-wrapped in approval. And I know you were just trying to protect me. At least you'd still be here, telling me I'm being foolish. A nurse entered quietly, checked the monitors, and offered a sad, practiced smile. Would you like a moment alone with her? Aaliyah nodded. The door closed gently, and she was left with the hum of machines and the weight of silence. Mama, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know we didn't agree on everything, especially Elon. But I loved you, still do. I've done that before. I'm scared of failing, of believing in someone who might not catch me if I fall. She swallowed hard, brushing a tear from her cheek. I'm scared, Mama. Not of being alone. She looked down at their hands, her mother's once powerful fingers now slack. I wish I had more time with you. I wish I had just one more fight with you, even. Geneva leaned back in her chair. So you're unemployed. Mama, I'm retired. I got time to ask questions, Geneva snapped, her gaze never flinching. Aaliyah felt the heat rise in her chest, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She knew her mother meant well. Geneva had spent her life scraping to build something from nothing, raising Aaliyah alone after her father vanished when she was 8. The house they sat in now was bought with years of frugality, late-night tutoring sessions, and carefully stored dreams. It wasn't a mansion, but it was hers. It was sacred. And now Geneva saw it slipping into the hands of a man she didn't trust. After Lon left that evening, mumbling something about checking a voltage reading back at the lab, Geneva didn't wait long. That's just a pretty fire waiting to burn your house down. Her mother wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. There was more to Lon than failure. He was a man trying, hurting, dreaming. Didn't that count for something? You're falling for potential. Baby, not the man, she said softly as she folded laundry in the living room. He's brilliant. Mama. Brilliance don't cook dinner, brilliance don't pay bills, and brilliance without stability. Aaliyah sat silently on the couch, folding socks that didn't belong to her. Geneva's eyes softened, her voice lower now. I just don't want to see you give up what you built chasing someone else's blueprint. Your life ain't a science experiment, not yet. That night, as Aaliyah lay awake listening to the cicadas outside her window, her mother's words pressed against her like a weight on her chest. She didn't respond. Not because she had no answer, but because deep down, she knew her mother saw the cracks too. They were spreading, quiet and slow, like water beneath the paint. But she wasn't ready to walk away. Some houses, like some hearts, don't fall apart all at once. They crumble, piece by piece. And yet, when he talked about the invention of portable, clean energy unit that could power homes off-grid, his voice carried the weight of destiny. I just need a chance, Leah, he whispered one night, his fingers wrapped around hers. One real chance. She squeezed his hand, her heart aching with love and fear. Then I'll help you find it. He kissed her forehead, called her his miracle. But miracles are often born in places too close to madness. And as the weeks wore on, Aaliyah began to wonder, was she nurturing a genius or enabling a storm? It was a Saturday afternoon when Aaliyah brought Ilan to meet her mother. Geneva had just come in from her garden, her gloved hands still streaked with damp soil and rosemary. The sun had set lopsided atop her cold silver hair, and her lips were pursed even before Aaliyah finished saying his name. Ilan, Geneva echoed, eyes narrowing behind her bifocals. What kind of name is that? You sure he ain't he out here trying to sound futuristic to distract from a broke present? Mama, Aaliyah sighed, already regretting her decision. He held a bottle of wine he couldn't afford and wore a blazer that still had a clearance tag awkwardly tucked under the sleeve. Good afternoon, Ms. Geneva. It's an honor to meet you, he said, offering a practiced smile. Geneva removed her gloves slowly, wiped her hands on a checkered towel, and stood in the center of her small kitchen like a judge presiding over a courtroom. Ilan walked in behind Aaliyah, nervous but trying to hide it. Well, not yet. I'm still in development. But Geneva's eyes never left Ellen's face, and her questions came sharp and fast. Geneva looked him up and down, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. We'll see about that. I've been researching renewable energy specifically. Solar storage solutions for underserved communities. The meeting was polite enough at first, small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, the vegetable prices. What exactly is it you do, young man? I'm an inventor, he said proudly. MHMM. And do these communities pay your rent? Ilan chuckled awkwardly. He apologized, of course, profusely, with the wide, pleading eyes of a boy who had broken something too fragile to fix. She told herself it was nothing, just frustration. Everyone had moments. Every time he stumbled, whether it was getting passed over for a research grant or being let go from another tech internship, his rage came spilling out like oil from a cracked pipe. But the moments multiplied. A slammed door here, a heated rant about a colleague there. Still, she stayed. Why not just take a regular job for now? Get something stable, even part-time. You can still work on the invention on weekends. The fire in his eyes reminded her of herself in her 20s, ambitious, fierce, and willing to settle. Raised by his grandmother in a rough Baltimore neighborhood, Ilan never knew his father and barely knew his mother. His brilliance had earned him scholarships and degrees, but not the structure to handle failure. He was all passion and no pause. Except Ilan wasn't fighting a system, he was fighting himself, and losing to eviction notices from his former place. Now, he spent most nights in her spare room, tinkering with wires and coils until dawn, muttering to himself about conductivity and solar stabilization. He ate her food, used her electricity, took up her space, because between those cracks were other things, softer things, nights where he would read to her from science books with the same tenderness someone else might reserve for poetry. Mornings when he'd wake her up with plantain pancakes and coffee sweetened just the way she liked it. And always, there were the dreams. She had spent so many years coloring inside the lines, doing what was safe, predictable, expected. Ilan was chaos wrapped in genius. He was the opposite of every man she'd ever dated. And yet, he made her feel alive. Ilan, baby, she had said once, curled beside him in bed while he scribbled designs on a notepad. Do you know how close I am? One more breakthrough and I'll change the world. A job's just a leash. I'm not trying to be owned. He had stared at her like she'd spoken blasphemy. She hadn't pushed again. How could she? He carried the weight of 1,000 ideas but no safety net. Aaliyah sometimes wondered if that's what drew her in his rawness. Still, the cost of loving him was becoming heavier. 3 job losses in 6 months. The monitor gave a soft, prolonged beep. Aaliyah flinched. Then silence. She didn't cry at first. She just stared, numb and still, as if her body had gone into quiet protest. It was only hours later, when she stood outside the hospital under a gray sky, that the sob finally tore through her. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't poetic. It was a sound that came from deep inside, from the part of her that was still a little girl, now untethered. 2 weeks later, she sat across from a lawyer in a stuffy office, fingers clenched in her lap. And this document confirms that all assets, including the house and retirement savings, are to be transferred to Ms. Aaliyah Daniels, the man said, sliding a folder toward her. She left it, all to me, Aaliyah asked, stunned. The garden with its stubborn tomatoes, her mother's life packed into signatures and estate clauses. The lawyer nodded. It's all here. The house felt different now, heavier, like it knew something had changed. She had everything. Notarized last year, very specific language. There's no dispute. Aaliyah stared at the papers. House, the savings. It should have felt like a blessing. But it felt like grief wearing a new mask. She returned home that night and stood in the hallway, letting her fingers trail along the familiar walls. She found Elon in the kitchen, hunched over blueprints and wires, his face lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He looked up and smiled. You okay? He asked. She believed in you. Just like you believe in me. She nodded, though she wasn't sure. She left me everything. Elon stood, walked over, and wrapped his arms around her. Aaliyah rested her head on his shoulder. But as the warmth of his embrace settled around her, she couldn't help but wonder, was it belief that her mother left behind? Or was it a warning disguised as love? Her stomach twisted, not because she missed him, but because some part of her still remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. Kendra, her coworker turned friend who helped her manage the booth, noticed the change in Aaliyah's face. You okay? Aaliyah nodded slowly. Lips pressed into a thin line. Yeah, that's him. Kendra didn't need a name. She already knew. Do you want to leave? She asked gently. Aaliyah shook her head. No, not this time. She had come too far to disappear again. When he reached the Geneva Grace booth, he froze. By noon, Elon was making his way around the fairgrounds, talking with vendors. Shaking hands, a photographer trailed behind him. Oro. Aaliyah, he said, his voice caught somewhere between surprise and something else, guilt, maybe. She turned to face him fully, arms crossed, chin lifted. Elon, there was a beat of silence. Then he glanced around at her display. This is yours, all mine. He reached for a jar of lavender body balm and turned it over. It smells like peace. A small smile touched her lips. That's the point. He nodded, then looked at her more closely. You look good. Strong, I am. He hesitated. I've thought about reaching out. That's the first honest thing you've said in a long time. Why didn't you? He sighed. Because I knew I didn't deserve an answer. She studied him. And I left you behind the second I stepped into the spotlight. I hope it brings light to the world. He looked down, shamed. You were everything, Aaliyah. You gave me everything. She didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. I used to wonder if you ever looked back, she said quietly. I did. He whispered, too late, once woven together. Now divided by choices that couldn't be undone, they stood there, two different stories now. You were the blueprint, you know. Everything I built. It started with your belief. I'm glad your invention worked, she said finally. He looked at her, his eyes softer now. And I hope yours brings healing to it. He placed the jar down and stepped back. Aaliyah smiled tightly and nodded. Good for him. She locked herself in the stockroom after that and cried for 15 minutes, not because she wanted him back, but because no one knew. No one would ever know that before the magazine spreads and clean suits and interviews. There was a woman who sold her mother's house, skipped meals, lived in a truck, and held the light steady while he built something out of shadows. No one knew that she had been the blueprint. Not the machine, not the funding. Her. But that was okay. She didn't need applause. She needed peace. One night, after a particularly hard shift, she took the long way home, passing the old lot where the truck used to sit. It was empty now. Overgrown with weeds. Silent. She parked the car and stepped out, standing there under the streetlight with arms folded across her chest. She remembered everything. The joy. The hunger. the spark of hope, and the loss. But she didn't feel bitterness. Not anymore. She whispered into the air, as if to the ghost of her former self, "You were brave." Then she turned and walked away. Days turned to weeks, weeks into months, and slowly, piece by piece, Aaliyah came back to herself. She got a small grant from a local women's startup incubator to begin testing her own skincare line. She started mixing oils in her apartment, packaging them in recycled jars, selling them online under the name Geneva Grace, a tribute to her mother. The boxes sat in the corner for a full week before Aaliyah had the energy to unpack them. Her body was in the space, but her soul was still back in that cold, echoing loft curled in a corner, clutching a dream that no longer belonged to her. The silence here was different too. It wasn't strained or suffocating like before. It was heavy, yes, but honest. There was no invention humming on the table, no assistant's shoes at the doorway, no laptop screen glowing long after midnight. There was only her, and grief. Because that's what no one tells you about loving someone so deeply that you forget yourself in. The process walking away feels like a death, the death of a future you built in your mind. Her voice didn't tremble anymore when she said she was okay, the death of a version of yourself that believed love alone could carry two people through anything. Aaliyah went back to work at the pharmacy full-time. Her coworkers said she looked tired but stronger. She wore her hair pulled back tight. She wasn't, but she was getting there. Every morning, she stood in front of her mirror and tried to see the woman who once existed before Lon. She was in the little notebook where Aaliyah began scribbling formulas for shea butter infusions and aloe masks. She was in the way Aaliyah now, every night before bed, lit a candle and sat in silence, not because she was waiting for someone, but because she was honoring herself. The woman who used to dream of owning her own organic skincare line. Who once believed she could blend science with softness. Who knew the difference between love and loyalty. But that woman wasn't fully gone. She was in the way Aaliyah still wore her mother's pendant, one of the few things she hadn't sold. Sometimes, she still thought of him, of Elon. Where he was, what he was doing, if he missed her. She tried not to check the news, but one day, found her anyway. Her coworker Kendra came in late from lunch, phone in hand, excitement buzzing. "Did you hear? That clean energy guy Lon Pierce, he's in Forbes. Big article about his invention, says he's changing the future." The silence in the loft was different. It wasn't the quiet comfort they used to share in the truck. It was a space between them. Measurable, heavy. Like someone had removed the soul of their story and left the shell behind. One evening, she tried to talk. "Elon, can we just sit? Without the laptop. Without the calls. Just us." He didn't even glance up. "Leah, I'm so close to closing a deal with a partner in Lagos. Can we do this tomorrow?" She nodded, but inside, something folded. A week later, she came home to find Jasmine sitting barefoot on the couch, sipping wine from Aaliyah's favorite mug. Her heart dropped. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Jasmine smiled nervously. "I didn't know this was yours." Elon walked out of the office, looked between them, and said nothing. That silence said everything. That night, Aaliyah packed her 2 boxes. He didn't stop her. "Not because I was weak, but because I believed in you." He didn't even ask where she was going. As she opened the door, she turned to him one last time. "I gave you everything," she said, her voice calm. But it was hers. He nodded, eyes on the floor. "And now," she added, "I have to believe in myself again." Then she left, carrying the weight of 1,000 invisible wounds and the strength it took to finally walk away. The apartment she moved into was small, 1-bedroom, thin walls, and a faucet that dripped just loud enough to keep her awake at night. One morning, Elon came back from a meeting with an investor wearing a new jacket, navy blue, sleek, expensive looking. Aaliyah blinked. "That looks like designer." He brushed past her. "It was on sale." She followed him into the room. "You told me we should hold off on expenses. That we couldn't even upgrade from this motel until next month." He sighed. "It's a business expense, Aaliyah." It's branding. These people need to see me as serious, selling pieces of my life so you could stand where you are now. And I'm not serious, she snapped. I've been working doubles, Elon. Skipping meals. He turned to her, face unreadable. I didn't ask you to do that. The words landed like a slap. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. He didn't take it back. Didn't soften. Just walked into the bathroom and shut the door behind him. She stood there, staring at the door, shaking. He had asked every time he looked at her with hope, every time he said, "You're the only one who believes in me." He had built a ladder from her sacrifices. And now, he was climbing. I didn't ask you to do that. It was true. But it wasn't fair. Elon rented a loft in a newly gentrified part of the city, all exposed brick and steel beams. It was modern, open, cold. The furniture was rented. The refrigerator had nothing but bottled water and protein shakes. He hired a part-time assistant named Jasmine, a fresh-faced grad student who wore smart glasses and always laughed a little too hard at his jokes. Because he had asked, just not in words. Alone, they finally moved out of the motel after 3 weeks. Aaliyah's things, what was left of them, fit into 2 boxes. She set her favorite plant by the window. It died within a week. Now that he had the world, would he still remember the woman who helped him build it? The check came faster than they expected. By the following week, Elon had received his first installment of the Accelerator grant, $50,000 wired directly into a new joint account the program had helped him open for business purposes. The moment the funds cleared, his phone buzzed nonstop. And forth, phone pressed to his ear, laughter pouring out of him like water that had been trapped for years. He talked fast about distribution, partnerships, production timelines. He tossed around words like equity and prototype scaling like he'd lived in boardrooms his entire life. Emails from startups, clean energy blogs, reporters, professors from MIT, even a small solar company in South Africa. Everyone suddenly wanted to know who Lon Pierce was. The same man who used to ask if she'd eaten now barely looked up when she came back from a 10-hour shift at the pharmacy. Aaliyah stood at the sink in the motel room as Elon paced back. Aaliyah washed the dishes slowly. They had eaten noodles again. It's all technical now. Don't stress your pretty little head. Even with the grant, Elon insisted they live modestly until things scaled. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the shift. The way he stood taller now. The way his eyes darted past her more often. The way he laughed with strangers but barely spoke to her unless it was about the project. The same hands that used to hold hers through cold nights now tapped rapidly on his laptop. And when she asked questions about the project, "You wouldn't get it, maybe," he said one evening, distracted. Her chest tightened. Pretty little head. She laughed bitterly after he said it, but he didn't notice. He was already lost in another email. The judges asked questions, technical, financial, ethical. Elon answered each with ease. Aaliyah jumped in only once, clarifying their vision for real-world application and partnerships with nonprofits in rural areas. When it ended, they were told to wait outside while the judges deliberated. They sat in the hallway in silence. Aaliyah's leg bounced involuntarily. She tried to stop it, but the pressure had nowhere to go. "No matter what happens," he said, "you made this possible." She was tired of hoping. Tired of betting on thin margins and exhausted dreams. Elon reached over, lacing his fingers with hers, behind the triumph in his voice. There was still that little boy trying to outrun failure. And yet, there was pride too. For once, maybe rightly earned. "You've demonstrated a clear breakthrough in affordable clean energy. Pending verification of your prototype's long-term output, we're offering you a place in our grant incubator program." He turned to Aaliyah, eyes shining, and pulled her into a hug so tight it lifted her from the ground. She looked at him, really looked at him. 10 minutes later, they were called back in. The judges were all standing. The woman in the cobalt suit smiled warmly. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "we're impressed." A pause. "And a $100,000 seed grant to scale your design." Elon stood frozen. Then, he laughed, a sound full of disbelief and release. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." She meant He talked of manufacturing plans, digital blueprints, global rollout strategies. He was on fire, alive. But he didn't correct her. That night, in a cheap motel off the 95, Aaliyah couldn't stop pacing. Aaliyah lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her. The breakthrough had come. The spark. The success. But somewhere deep inside, a question still lingered like a shadow. I still can't believe it, Aaliyah said, breaking the silence. After all this time, they actually want to see me. They should have wanted to see you a long time ago, she replied quietly. You've always had more faith in me than I did. He smiled, glancing at her. She depawned her mother's old gold bracelet one Geneva had worn every Sunday to church, and always said would go to Aaliyah's first daughter. Aaliyah hadn't hesitated. There hadn't been time to. She didn't say it out loud, but lately, her faith had started to look more like endurance. It had taken 3 extra pharmacy shifts to afford the rental and fuel. Aaliyah had brilliance. But brilliance didn't always come with a plan. Now, everything rested on this one meeting. Men in tailored suits and women in smart blazers buzzed through the lobby. Aaliyah suddenly felt underdressed in her second-hand heels and gray blazer with a threadbare lining. They arrived in D.C. just after 10. Aaliyah watched as he transformed before their eyes. No longer the man sleeping on a truck floor, but the visionary he always said he was. He spoke of sustainable energy in underserved communities, of eliminating the need for diesel generators in schools and clinics, of making light a right, not a privilege. The accelerator's headquarters was sleek and sterile glass walls, silver lettering, clean lines, and a manufacturing cost of less than $200 per unit. Elon looked like he belonged chin-high, crisp white shirt, eyes gleaming. "We've got this," he whispered, squeezing her hand. They were ushered into a presentation room with high ceilings and a circular table at the center. 3 judges waited, an older man with horn-rimmed glasses, a young black woman in a cobalt blue suit, and a middle-aged Indian woman with a tablet and sharp eyes. "Mr. Pierce," the woman in blue said, "you've got 15 minutes. Show us what you've got." Elon unpacked the Lumessel with care, connecting wires, explaining specs. Then, he powered it on. The LED strip lit instantly. The numbers on the monitor held steady. 24 hours of off-grid energy, Elon said. Aaliyah's eyes widened. "That's only a week away." "I know. We've got to get everything ready, presentation, data, backup models, and we need to find a way to get there." She blinked. "You mean drive?" He winced. "The truck won't make it. We'll need a rental, and maybe a motel, just for the night." Aaliyah's stomach tightened. The money was gone. Her last paycheck had gone to Ellen's wiring parts. They had maybe $100 between them. "I'll figure it out," she said. "I can pick up another shift. Maybe pawn the microwave. Whatever it takes." He pulled her close, forehead resting against hers. "You always save me." She didn't respond. Because somewhere deep in her chest, she wondered when it was all over, would he do the same for her? The sun hadn't yet risen when they hit the road. The prototype sat nestled in a cushioned box in the trunk, its core components insulated with bubble wrap and hope. This wasn't just a pitch. It was the first door that could lead to everything they had worked for, or everything they could lose. Aaliyah had triple-checked everything: batteries, test notes, schematics, the flash drive with Ellen's presentation. She held the USB in her lap like it was made of glass. Elon sat behind the wheel of the rented sedan, a white Toyota Corolla that still smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner. They were on their way to Washington, D.C., a 4-hour drive from Baltimore, to present the Lumessel at the Clean Energy Future Accelerator, a tech incubator with connections to government grants and venture capitalists. Aaliyah leaned her head against the window, watching trees blur by as the car hummed down the highway. He grabbed her hands, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did it too. Without you, there is no this." She wanted to believe that. She needed to. They danced in the narrow space, a messy, sleepy waltz beneath flickering shadows. Elon kissed her forehead, her cheek. Her mouth. He held her close, whispering promises between every breath. Not doubt Aaliyah wanted to trust the moment, but exhaustion. She had nothing left to give. The machine might have worked, but she was running on fumes. I'll get it patented. We'll submit it to the Clean Energy Accelerator. Investors will line up. You'll have your business. A proper house. Everything. I've got to replicate the results, film it, and then I'll send it to the accelerator team. This is it, Leah. This is everything. But underneath the joy was something else. She stocked shelves at the pharmacy, smiled at customers, and for once, didn't dread returning to the truck. There was something waiting now, something more than a tired man and an unfinished promise. Wasn't romantic, but it was real. Still, that night, in the warmth of their shared pride, they made love on the floor of the truck, between tangled wires and the scent of soldered plastic. You should call someone. Maybe a journalist, or a friend in the industry. Hope wrapped around them like a fragile thread. The next morning, Helen was already up, reviewing data logs and scribbling furiously. She made coffee over the small butane stove and nodded. He grinned. I don't need friends. I've got results. The accelerator team, they want to see the prototype in person, in DC next Friday. He didn't shave, didn't shower, didn't stop. Aaliyah spent the day at work. Distracted but lighter than usual. That evening, she returned to find Elon pacing, his phone in hand, cheeks flushed with excitement. They mailed back, he said breathlessly. Elon stirred, his voice groggy. Leah, she turned toward him. I'm here. I had a dream, he mumbled. We were in Ghana. Your skincare line had a shop there. Solar-powered everything. You were so happy. She smiled faintly. Sounds beautiful. It will be, he whispered. Promise. And even though her bones ached, even though she didn't fully believe anymore, she said it back. I believe you. Because sometimes, belief isn't about certainty, it's about love refusing to leave. The night the invention finally sparked, it didn't feel like a victory. It was to 13 a.m. Aaliyah knew because she'd been awake for hours, listening to the wind rattle the thin truck walls. Her mind caught in a loop of calculations, not of electricity, but of bills, meals, miles, and time. She was cold. Her hoodie didn't reach past her wrists anymore. She missed thick blankets and the soft creak of her mother's floorboards. The machine was glowing. With a steady hum and a faint vibration, Alan's hands were trembling. Then, through the quiet, a burst of light pulsed from the dining table, bright, fierce, and blue. Its coils were stable, the inverter temperature held, and miraculously the device was generating consistent energy output. Elon had rigged it to power a small LED lantern. The bulb lit up, casting soft white light across the truck walls. Elon, she shouted. Bolting upright. What was that? He was already up, hovering over the Lumesal unit like a father watching a child take its first breath. It worked, he whispered. It finally worked. Aaliyah stood beside him, heart pounding. The prototype's indicator lights blinked green. You did it. For the first time in months. The darkness was gone. He let out a shaky laugh. Do you see it? Do you see what I've built? She nodded slowly, eyes welling. Elon stirred, his voice groggy. I'm here, he mumbled. We were in Ghana. Your skincare line had a shop there. Solar-powered everything. You were so happy, Leah. She turned toward him. Sounds beautiful. I had a dream. Aaliyah knew because she'd been awake for hours, listening to the wind rattle the thin truck walls. Her mind caught in a loop of calculations, not of electricity, but of bills, meals, miles, and time. She was cold. Her hoodie didn't reach past her wrists anymore. She missed thick blankets and the soft creak of her mother's floorboards. She smiled faintly. It will be, he whispered. Belief isn't about certainty, promise. And even though her bones ached, even though she didn't fully believe anymore, she said it back. Through the quiet, he whispered, heart pounding. The prototype's indicator lights blinked green. Its coils were stable, eyes welling. You did it. The inverter temperature held, and miraculously the device was generating consistent energy output. Elon had rigged it to power a small LED lantern. The bulb lit up, casting soft white light across the truck walls. It finally worked. A burst of light pulsed from the dining table, bright, fierce. The darkness was gone, and blue. "I believe you," she shouted, bolting upright. What was that? Because sometimes, it's about love refusing to leave. The night the invention finally sparked, it didn't feel like a victory. It was to 13A. "Do you see it? Do you see what I've built?" Then, Elon, he was already up, hovering over the Lumessel unit like a father watching a child take its first breath. The machine was glowing, with a steady hum and a faint vibration. Alan's hands were trembling. It worked. Aaliyah stood beside him. For the first time in months, he let out a shaky laugh. She nodded slowly. Elon, for all his flaws, was still trying. He stayed up late testing voltages, modifying code, replacing components, ordering new parts from the scraps of money Aaliyah managed to tuck away after rent, gas, and food. It'll bring power to villages that haven't had electricity in a century. And when that happens, Aaliyah, when that happens, it's all because of you. When he talked about his invention, his eyes still gleamed like they did when they first met, like he was watching the future in spool in front of him. Other days, it crashed when the circuits fried or the inverter failed mid-test. This machine, he told her one night, pointing at the newest version of the Lumessel, will change how the world sees energy. She forced a smile, even as her stomach growled. "Just make sure it works," she said. Thunder cracked like bones and the roof of the truck leaked from a rusted seam above the sink. Elon was asleep, but Aaliyah sat up, gathering water in a plastic bowl and staring into the dark. Just sleeping. Lightning flashed, and for a second, she saw herself reflected in the broken window. Tired eyes, thinning edges of her once rich curls, the weight of weeks without rest dragging her face downward. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. It will. But belief, she was learning, was not a straight line. Some days it soared when the lights blinked green or the battery held longer than expected. The highs made her feel like maybe, just maybe, everything would be worth it. But the lows, they carved pieces out of her she didn't know she could lose. One night, the rain came hard. She didn't recognize herself. The girl who once lit candles and cooked pasta in a cozy kitchen, who had dreams of opening a small skincare line one day, who used to read poetry before bed. That woman had gone quiet. Not dead. Maybe one day she'd return. But tonight, all she had was this truck, this humming invention, and the man she'd given everything for. The stars blinked above her, cold, distant, and silent. Behind her, the generator sputtered. Elon swore loudly. Something had gone wrong again. She closed her eyes and let the sound pass over her like wind through broken branches. This was the price of belief. And though she didn't know it yet, it wasn't the final one. It was just the first. By the second month, the truck no longer felt temporary. They stopped calling it the command center and started referring to it simply as home. The food truck's faded red paint peeled under the summer sun, and the chipped white logo Tasty Time has still clung to the side like a memory someone else had abandoned. Inside, Aaliyah arranged their limited belongings with practiced precision. Elon's notebook stacked neatly in an old milk crate, a folding mirror taped to the wall near her cot. Her pharmacy scrubs hung on a wire hanger from a hook by the sink, were of his prototype. Cycling through yet another test. The frustration in his breath when something shorted out, and sometimes rarely his silence, that frightened her most of all. The worst part wasn't the space, it was the smallness of it all. The closeness. 12-hour stretches on her feet, no breaks, aching knees, and strained smiles for customers who never guessed she went home to a truck parked behind a diner. That she believed in a man more than she believed in comfort. That every night she questioned her own judgment and then woke up and made coffee anyway. She showered at the YMCA in the mornings, using travel-sized bottles tucked into a duffel. She ate vending machine granola bars and told herself it was just for now. She could hear everything. Elon talking to himself at night, running calculations aloud, She'd begun taking extra shifts at the pharmacy, just until the invention worked, just until Elon made it. The few people who still kept in touch Tamika. Her cousin Latrice had stopped asking how she was. They knew she wouldn't answer honestly. What could she say? She missed her mother, not just her presence, but her warnings, her solidity, her ability to see through the fog. Geneva would have called this madness. You don't trade bricks for dreams. She would have said, you don't gamble the roof over your head for someone else's storm. But the money was gone now. The house was sold, the deed signed, the check cleared, and all they had left was the machine and the possibility that it might work. Morning, he murmured, rubbing his eyes. Elon stirred and blinked. Stretching his long arms against the truck's ceiling, she handed him the thermos. Still hot. He smiled. You're an angel. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out the window at the sky clouds gathering, gray and slow. Elon, she said after a moment, how close are you? His smile faded. Closer than ever. That's not an answer. He hesitated, then sat up straighter. I'm one test away. If this next trial stabilizes the output for a full 24 hours, we can take it to a clean tech accelerator in D.C. There's a conference in 2 weeks. I already emailed the director. If it works, we'll be presenting to government reps and investors. Her hands trembled slightly from hunger. She hadn't eaten since morning, but she needed air more. Then she needed food. Aaliyah nodded slowly. And if it doesn't work, he looked away. It will. The silence between them thickened. That evening, while Elon tested voltage currents under dim lantern light, Aaliyah stepped outside and sat on an overturned crate. She watched the world go by, the kids on skateboards, the couple laughing outside a liquor store, the man selling roasted peanuts from a cart with one squeaky wheel. They were all living, really living. She was waiting for a miracle in a duffel bag, waiting for Elon to finally win so they could go back to being whole, waiting for her sacrifice to make sense.
The truck smelled like rust, old coffee, and desperation. Aaliyah sat on the edge of the torn passenger seat, her knees pressed together, fingers curled around the thermos she'd refilled at the gas station. They made a plan: sell the house, move into something temporary, push everything toward the invention. No distractions, no more delays, just focus. Across from her, Elon snored lightly, curled in a wool blanket, his notebook resting on his chest like a holy text. She even joked that it was like glamping. She brought battery-powered lights, a foldable cot, and a tiny portable stove. She called it their mobile command center. His invention, now carefully encased in a black duffel bag, sat between them on the floor, cocooned in foam, wires, and hope. They'd been living out of the abandoned food truck for 3 weeks now. When Aaliyah had handed Elon the check, what they hadn't planned for was the rising rent, the rejection from every short-term lease they applied for. Elon knew the owner, a former classmate from his electrical engineering course, who agreed to let them borrow it for a while in exchange for a promise. If the invention worked, he'd get first dibs on installing it in a future food truck fleet. Elon had shaken on it with all the confidence of a man who saw nothing but stars ahead, or the blown transmission in her car the day they moved out. What they hadn't planned for was reality. The food truck had been sitting in an overgrown lot behind a closed-down diner. Every morning she woke with a crick in her neck, and every night she fought the ache in her chest. She knew the truth. Aaliyah saw only the cracked windshield and the bucket they now used to catch rainwater. She tried not to cry when they moved in. But this wasn't an adventure. This was survival. And it was costing her more than money.
Later, as he slept on the couch beside a half-disassembled generator, she walked to the spare bedroom, shut the door, and sat cross-legged on the floor. She opened her mother's old lockbox and pulled out the last stack of savings documents. $30,000 from the house sale. The only thing left of her mother's life, her voice, her legacy. Her fingers hovered over the papers. She remembered her mother's words like a song stuck in her chest. Don't tie your future to a man's potential. And yet here she was, standing at the very edge of that warning. But Aaliyah wasn't naive. She wasn't blind. She knew the risk. She knew the quiet way he thanked her when he thought she was asleep. She knew that no one else had ever believed in him, not even himself, the way she did. She also knew Alan's heart. She knew how he looked at her like she was his only constant. Maybe she was being foolish. Maybe she was being brave. Maybe like every woman who ever gambled on love, she was both. She stood slowly, the decision already sealed. But that's it, Elon. That's everything. The next morning, over dry cereal and weak coffee, she placed the check on the table. Elon stared at it like it was a hallucination. "What is this? $20,000, she said calmly. "To finish your prototype, get your materials. Test it properly. The rest we'll use to get by." He reached for her hand. Stunned, "You're serious?" "I'm all in," she said. His eyes welled up. "You won't regret this. I promise you. You just saved the world." She gave him a tired smile. "No," she said. "I just saved you. Don't make me regret that." Outside, the city buzzed, cars passing, lights blinking, life going on as usual. Inside, a gamble had been made, one that would either ignite a future or burn everything to ash. Aaliyah stood in the kitchen doorway watching him, arms crossed, her face pulled tight with exhaustion. Her feet ached from her pharmacy shift, and the brown envelope containing the overdue electricity bill sat unopened on the counter behind her. They were down to 1 loaf of bread, 3 eggs, and a can of beans. "Elon," she said softly, "we need groceries." He didn't look up. "Almost done. I can't keep covering everything alone. We need to talk about what comes next." "You think I don't know that?" "I'm trying, Aaliyah. I'm this close." He flinched at her tone. Finally turning toward her, his eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with sleeplessness. "You've been this close for months," she snapped before she could stop herself. "Every setback, every delay, it's not failure, it's refining. If I can get the current to stabilize and hold for just 1 more hour, we'll never have to worry again. That's what I'm fighting for." He stood suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. "You don't understand, but belief doesn't put food on the table. It's going to work. I know it." "And what am I fighting for?" she shot back. "My savings are almost gone, Elon. I've stopped buying my blood pressure medication just so we could pay for your shipping materials. I've skipped meals, sold furniture. And every day, I go to work while you're here chasing something that still hasn't worked." That silenced him. For a long moment, they just stood there, 2 dreamers pulled apart by reality. Then Elon looked away, voice low. "I want to believe that," she whispered. That night, they had toast for dinner, just toast. No butter, no eggs, not even tea. Aaliyah tried not to cry when Elon offered her the larger slice. "You didn't." "I offered." His eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen in weeks. "Are you sure? Things are already tight." "I'm bringing a storm with me, Aaliyah." She stepped forward, cupping his cheek. "Then let it rain." Aaliyah adjusted, made room in the fridge for his herbal teas, gave up half the linen closet, even let him cover her dining table with circuit boards. The first few days were manageable. Elon kept mostly to himself, working late into the night, his murmured theories and the occasional burst of frustration echoing from the guest room. He was irritable, his temper flaring at little things, the internet buffering during his upload, the dog barking next door, the toast burning. She knelt down quietly and tucked a blanket over him. But the stress simmered beneath the surface. Then came the night she found him asleep on the floor, curled up beside his prototype like a child clutching a toy. In his sleep, he mumbled something. "Just need 1 more test." Almost there, Aaliyah sat back against the wall, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. But as she looked at Elon, bruised by failure yet burning with purpose, a terrible thought settled into her chest. He was losing everything except the dream. And maybe, she feared, that dream was beginning to consume him. She thought about the inheritance money sitting in her savings account untouched, a safety net her mother had left behind. Aaliyah hadn't touched it because she knew once it was gone, there'd be no getting it back. A battered, half-open box of wires, photovoltaic plates, microcontrollers, and blinking lights. It didn't look like it could change the world. It barely looked like it could power a lamp. What? If this really was his last stand, Lon hadn't left the dining room in days. Blueprints were pinned to the walls, notes scribbled in pencil and permanent marker layered over each other in an obsessive frenzy. He muttered constantly, sometimes to Aaliyah, sometimes to himself, sometimes to the machine. What if the next step wasn't just belief but sacrifice? The smell of solder and scorched wires clung to the air like smoke in a kitchen after a fire. The invention, his Lumessel unit, sat like a silent deity in the center of the table, but to Lon, it was the future.
He hadn't called her until after it was already done. 2 weeks. That's all. Everything about Ellen screamed potential, even now. Even here, where the walls reeked of damp neglect and burnt ramen noodles. I just needed a little more time, he muttered as she approached. Aaliyah said nothing at first. You haven't been paying rent, she asked quietly. You think those things fund themselves. I paid what I could, he snapped. I told you I could help if you were in trouble. But you didn't say anything. Her stomach twisted. Ellen, she said, trying to keep her voice calm, I'm not a child, Aaliyah. He barked. I don't need saving. Then what do you call this? She gestured toward the hallway, the boxes. The neighbors peering through half-cracked doors with curious eyes. It was pride. Ellen didn't want to be seen as weak, even when he was crumbling. And he especially didn't want to lean too hard on the one person who believed in him unconditionally. I thought I had more time. I'm so close, Leah. I can feel it. This is the last version. Once I test this prototype, it'll all change. We'll both have everything we ever wanted. He turned away, running a hand through his thick curls. Except a roof over your head, she said gently. The silence stretched. Aaliyah knew this wasn't just about an unpaid bill, but belief didn't pay rent. Come stay with me, she said, the words heavy but firm. Until you get back on your feet. He hesitated. I can't ask you to do that.
Hey Coos, Latrice's voice hummed. Heard from Tamika you've got that boy shacking up with you now, Elon. I googled him. Smart, yes. But also, unemployed and argumentative. That's who you're building a future with. Another sigh. Another opinion. Latrice went on. Her answer stayed the same. I'm not trying to get in your business, but Mama always said love without logic is just borrowed time. You're getting older, Lee. You really want to waste your best years on someone still trying to prove himself? She deleted the message before it ended. I'll buy you that house in Savannah with the big porch and ocean breeze. Just you, me. And silence. You like silence, don't you? It didn't matter how many voices warned her. Loved how he cried after his grandmother died, head buried in her lap like a bow looking for a home. Loved how he called her his muse, his reason, his day one, even when the doubts came whispering late at night, reminding her that belief was only as good as the person holding it. She loved him. Loved the way his mind lit up when he solved a new problem. She remembered sitting on the porch with him one evening, his fingers stained with solder, his excitement childlike. I swear, Leo, once I make it, you'll never have to lift another finger. By the time Ali arrived, most of his belongings were already piled in the hallway, wires tangled in a cardboard box, stacks of notebooks tied together with a frayed shoelace, and a dusty air mattress folded in defeat. She did, and she believed him. Even when her friends scoffed. even when her own reflection in the mirror began to look more tired, more worn. Still, she stood by him. She stood against all voices, even her own. The eviction notice came on a Wednesday morning, crisp and unapologetic, taped to the chipped green door of Ellen's apartment like a final insult. The air in the cafe smelled of cinnamon and skepticism. Aaliyah sat at the corner table with her oldest friend Tamika, who had just taken a long sip of her vanilla latte before narrowing her eyes across the table. "You're telling me you gave him keys to the house? He's not just staying here and there anymore." "Mika, girl, that man hasn't paid rent, phone bill, or for that overpriced oat milk he keeps pouring into his post-workout smoothies." This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. Tamika had known her since middle school braids, braces, and secret notes passed during algebra, but lately, their talks felt like interviews with hidden judgments behind each question. "You sure it's sense and not just desperation? He lives with me now." It just made sense. Aaliyah stirred her tea slowly, her shoulders already tensing. "Sense," Tamika blinked. "The prototype glowed on its own last night. He was up until 3 a.m. working on it. I've never seen anyone so driven." She hit play reluctantly, expecting a casual check-in. Aaliyah sighed. "But you don't put your whole life in someone else's gas tank, Aaliyah. You run out, they keep moving, and you're left on empty." "I'm not desperate," Aaliyah said softly, staring down at the steam swirling from her cup. "I'm in love. And he's not lazy, Mika. He's just focused. Obsessed, even. He believes he's sitting on something big." Tamika leaned back in her seat, arms folded. "Focused is fine. But obsession don't pay for groceries, or new tires, or emergency dental surgery when all that stress starts breaking you down." Her emergency savings had taken a hit after replacing the water heater last month, and with Elon home all day, the utilities had nearly doubled. Aaliyah tried to smile, but it faded quickly. The truth was, the bills were stacking up. "He's building something real," she said, but the words felt thinner this time. "I've seen it." Tamika's face softened, but only slightly. "Driven is good." Those words echoed in her mind long after they parted ways. Later that week, while folding laundry, Aaliyah's phone buzzed with a voice message from her cousin Latrice in Atlanta.